Hi there and welcome to the free workshop, Sketchbooking Your Style. In this workshop, I'll teach you how to use a sketchbook to find your signature, authentic, original style. How to go through from page to page, from front to back, and what are the steps you need to really fill a sketchbook and make progress along the way with an intention of finding your own original style by using the sketchbook. Now, anyone can fill up a sketchbook with, random stuff, sketching this or that, but when you fill a sketchbook with intention and have a little bit of direction to what you're doing in this sketchbook, you can really see your progress from start to finish and end up in a place that you really, really love and are super proud of at the end of the day. So I'm so excited that you've decided to join me in this workshop. It is pre-recorded, so yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the video. Hey everyone, and welcome to the workshop. I'm so excited you're here and I cannot wait to show you how to develop your own art style. But first, let's go over the agenda for today. First, I want to go over just a little introduction and then we're going to dive into the art style survey results. We are going to go over your style assessment and then we will jump into the sketchbook project and exercise. So what you need for this workshop is your computer, laptop, or iPad. You need your art style survey results. And so if you haven't taken the art style survey, look below this workshop and there will be a link. You need to download your style assessment PDF. So there will also be a link for that below this video. And you need your sketchbook and your art supplies of choice. I've included a materials of the materials I'll be using, but you can use any materials you like. You also need the reference photo, which will be linked below. Intro. Hey, what's up? I'm Lauren Leslie. I was born and raised in South Carolina. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia with my family. For those of you who don't know me, my rug designs and textile designs have sold at places like Anthropologie when I was working in-house. And here is one of my rug designs on West Elm's Instagram with over 20,000 likes. And I've also designed outdoor rugs for Target as an in-house senior textile designer. Back in 2019, I launched my own business and now license my fabrics with PBS Fabrics. So this is part of my Lauren Leslie Studio brand. But it didn't start out that way. Here I am, circa 1980 something, coloring in my coloring book on Christmas morning. In school, I was a BFA studio art major and I focused on oil painting. My first job was actually as a graphic designer. I worked at a t-shirt company. And then my second job was as a textile designer, and I was finally getting somewhere that made sense for what I was really passionate about. Then in 2019, I opened my business, Lauren Leslie Studio, and here I am at my first trade show exhibiting at Blueprint and showing my designs for the very first time. I developed an art style in 90 days. In order to go to this trade show, I had to put together a body of work. And so I had to develop an art style in about 90 days. I signed up for the trade show with no body of work. And so I had about 90 days to pull it off before, this due date of packing up, getting on a plane, and going to the trade show. So obviously I had to have something to bring. And I know if I can do it, you can do it too. All right, let's go over the art style survey results. So we've literally had over 1,400 responses, and this is so amazing because it really helps me see what kind of problems you're having with developing your art style. So when it comes to developing your art style, your number one problem with finding your style at 27.4% is that you're inspired by everything. You can't narrow down. So you really just are lacking that direction and focus on where to go with developing your style. The second one is all of the above. You're having all of these problems that you get bored quickly and give up. You can't seem to prioritize your art style practice. You feel too lazy. You need more motivation, guidance, and a dedicated schedule. This was the third biggest problem at 15.3%. I don't know what to do or where to start. I feel totally lost. So all of these issues are really seeming to affect you guys, but with these three being the most prevalent. So when I ask, what is your biggest struggle with your art style? 42.4% said all of the above, again, with the biggest problem was refining stylistic elements like line, color, volume, proportion, composition, perspective, motifs and symbols, etc. The next biggest problem was choosing an industry that's right for me: illustration, pattern design, fine art, and all of that. Another one was finding consistent subject matter. So all of these were an issue, but with those being kind of the top three. When I asked, do you keep a regular sketchbook practice? 47% of you said not consistently. And so I think we're starting to understand what part of the problem is. Almost 25% of you said you do sketch at least once a week. So that's really good. At least you're getting somewhere. 17% said you sporadically sketch maybe once a month or so. So if we pair these two together, that's a lot. Only 11% of you said, yes, I sketch daily. So I think we can really start to see what the problem is here. Okay, and then I asked a couple of other questions, but that gives me a lot of information. There are also tons of comments here that I have had the privilege of reading through, so thank you for that. So how do I find my own original art style? The problems from looking at the survey seem to be here. Problem number 1, you're inspired by everything and can't narrow down. Problem number 2, you get bored quickly and give up. Problem number 3, you don't know where to start, you feel totally lost. Problem number 4, you can't seem to prioritize an art style practice. And problem number 5, you feel like you can do any style, so how do you choose just one? If any of these problems really resonate with you, then you are in the right place because we are going to cover some of these today. 3, style assessment. So if you haven't already, go ahead and download your style assessment linked below this workshop. Print it out or you can fill it out digitally. If you're on an iPad, you can open it in your Books app, or if you're on a Mac, you can use the Preview app and type. One of the first things we want to cover when it comes to your style assessment is subject matter. So when you open your sketchbook, you need to know what you're going to focus on as a subject. It could be landscapes or even cityscapes. It could be still life, portraits, figure drawing, which is different from portraits. That's kind of more drawing the full figure of people. Or you could be focused on an abstract subject matter, something more non-representational. For your subject matter, I want you to go ahead and start collecting reference photos. Here's a collage of my trip to Egypt, and this is inspiration for me for a new project. And I have tons and tons of reference photos from my trip. Your reference photos could be something like your own photography, like I used here, or you could use something like royalty-free photos on pexels.com. You can also use really any reference photo that you're finding online as long as you're willing to change it. If your style is going to be anything close to realism, I would suggest using royalty-free photos. Color palette. Go ahead and also start collecting inspiration for your color palette. Go ahead and create color swatches in your sketchbook and try to figure out what color palette suits you best. Test out the palette in your sketchbook. So this is a great place to just do little thumbnails and test out the swatches and see what colors are looking great together. You can always adjust the colors. It's not going to be something permanent, but we want to have a limited color palette to use throughout your sketchbook practice so that your pieces start to look cohesive. This doesn't mean you can't adjust colors. I recommend adjusting colors, but we do want to stick to something consistent with your color. Here are some color palettes that I've made in the past, and so I want you to just see how my illustrations relate to each other on each different palette. So you can see the spring palette is very pastel. The summer palette, you can see how the yellow in Kristen Bell's hair is the same yellow behind Oprah, and the blue is the same blue in Zooey Deschanel and Kerry Washington's clothes. You can also kind of see the same colors being related in the autumnal palette and the winter palette. So you can really see here how powerful it is when creating an art style to stick to a particular color palette. For your medium, I want you to choose some art supplies that you feel comfortable with or want to improve upon. Having one medium is going to really inform your style, and so it could be something like graphite or charcoal, pen and ink, colored pencils, alcohol markers, Posca pens, dry pastels or oil pastels, watercolor, regular gouache, acrylic gouache. You could be doing collages in your sketchbook, or you could do mixed media. In your sketchbook, that's kind of what I recommend in terms of mediums. Something like oil paint is probably going to be too difficult to use in your sketchbook, and even acrylic paint has a difficult time sticking together. And so if you're going to do something like that, I would recommend maybe working on loose sheets of paper rather than an actual sketchbook. So I'm guessing you signed up for this workshop because you want to be somewhere in the middle of this scale. On one end of the spectrum, we have realism. And if we're going to go even further left, it's photorealism. And that is definitely an amazing style to have. On the other end of the spectrum, we have abstraction, and to the extreme of even non-representational abstraction, where it's really just about the texture or the color. Now, I'm guessing you signed up for this workshop because you, again, like I said, want to be somewhere in the middle of this. I'm guessing that you want to have some kind of representational artwork where people can understand what they're seeing, but you don't want to continue the style of realism that you were taught in primary art classes. And so that's kind of what I'm guessing. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to continue in realism, but I have a hunch that you want to get away from realism and have some different stylistic elements that are really identifiable for your own art. From there, I want you to continue gathering inspiration for stylistic elements. So for your color, line work, shape, composition, marks, and brush strokes. And so I want you to look at other artists and not to copy their style, but to find one artist who you really love their color palette. Find another artist where you like their use of line work or maybe the absence of line. Find another artist where you really are just inspired by the shapes that they're using. Find another artist where you really love their composition, and find a different artist where you're really liking their marks and brush strokes. That could be smooth texture, it could be rough texture, it could be anything. Number 4, your sketchbook project. So the materials you need for the exercise today include really just one sketchbook, but I do want to go over having 2 sketchbooks. I think when you are developing an art style as a sketchbook project, you need one extra sketchbook that's just a tiny sketchbook like I have here on the left with kind of bad paper, something cheap. It could even be a notepad that you have sitting around the house, something that you don't want to spend a lot of money on. It could even be free if you already found something in your house. But I do recommend having one extra sketchbook that you can just do something random on, right? But the sketchbook project we're going to be doing is a very intentional project where you need to stick to the plan. You will need your art supplies of choice. I do have a materials list linked below if you want to use the same materials that I'm using in this exercise, but I encourage you to use the art supplies you feel the most comfortable with or want to improve on. So that could be something like all the materials we listed before. So I do recommend having one good sketchbook and one bad sketchbook. And it's not necessarily good or bad, but that's just an easy way to reference it. So your good sketchbook for your sketchbook project for developing your art style should be a larger size. I like to use 8.5 by 11, but any kind of larger size is good. It should also be high quality paper. I'm going to say it should not be cheap. Now that may differ for different people. However, I do want you to feel a little bit precious about this sketchbook. It needs to be something that you're not just doing random stuff in. It needs to be something that you are working on a goal. Therefore, it needs to be a little bit special to you. It is for your project pieces. It's not exactly like finishing a final artwork, but it's close to that, a lot closer to that than your bad sketchbook. Your bad sketchbook can be a smaller size, low quality paper. It can be very cheap or free, and it's not special. So when you are just feeling the itch and you just want to do something totally random, you want to change your medium, you want to break away from the subject matter you picked, this is where your bad sketchbook comes in, and you can just doodle. You can scribble, you can do experiments, you can test art supplies. This is for all your randomness. Now, in your good sketchbook, the sketchbook you're using for your project, I want you to write down an intention. Write an intention on the first page of your good sketchbook. Think about any medium you want to practice, skills you'd like to improve on, or a specific goal you might have. Here is your reference photo that is linked below, so go ahead and download your reference photo. This is what we're going to be drawing today, but you can use any inspiration that you like. I've also included these 4 sketches that you are more than welcome to download. It's a very loose sketch intentionally. And that is so we can just build out a cow in our own styles. So I'm going to be going over 4 different styles of how to draw a cow. This is not really the style, it's just a map of kind of where things go on the cow's body. Okay, so I've got my quote-unquote good sketchbook here. This is a Strathmore watercolor sketchbook with cold pressed paper. It's a high quality sketchbook and it's definitely not cheap. So I definitely feel like I'm using this sketchbook for particular projects, not just for randomness and, you know, I don't know. Here is my tiny sketchbook that I use for just kind of like randomness. If I'm just feeling super random, just want to create something dumb. I don't know. I mean, some cool things come out of this sketchbook, but because it's so small and it's cheap paper, it's, you know, a good place just to kind of scribble and get my creative energy out. And then I can really like focus on this for more intentional projects. So if you're testing out a color palette or something like that, you can use a small sketchbook or just a notepad. It doesn't have to be anything that you buy. I actually made this myself, but yeah, I like bookbinding. Okay, so in my sketchbook, I have laid out 4 quadrants, and I went ahead and did this preliminary sketch of these 4 cows, and I just made it a really rough sketch on purpose so that we can add stylistic elements and so that you can draw the cows how you like them. And so an easy way to kind of transfer them to your paper is just to take a pencil with a little bit of a softer lead. I'm using an 8B pencil. So that's a pretty soft lead, and I can kind of see the lines through the back of my printout. And I'm just gonna go over my sketch like this. Kind of lightly, just where I see the lines. And of course you can sketch directly on your paper if you want to. This is only if you're feeling intimidated, like you don't know how to draw a cow. You know, this is just to help you really just get a map of where things kind of go, but we can change it later. So this is just, again, like a very light, loose sketch, and we can build on it. It's just kind of the building block, our very first building block. You can also use transfer paper if you happen to have some. And you're just gonna flip your paper over, and you might wanna secure your paper with a piece of tape to make sure it doesn't move while you're transferring. And then just take something like a ballpoint pen and trace over your cows or whatever motif you're doing. Doesn't have to be a cow. And again, you can do this quickly. This is just supposed to be very loose, and you can flip it over to make sure that it is transferring, and we get a very nice light line. I like this better than transfer paper because sometimes the transfer paper just looks a little too dark for me. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just do really loose, sketchy lines too with your pen, and that way you'll feel less precious about your drawing. This is, again, just a little bit of a map and a guideline. Once you've got your 4 cows transferred or your other motifs sketched out, you can get rid of your sketch, and we can try to start making some different drawing decisions. So we have kind of the map of, generally we know that each cow is gonna fit in this square. So that's basically just giving us those guidelines. But I do want to kind of do some different drawing styles with you guys. If you feel like the map is looking too dark, or your transfer or your initial sketch is looking too dark, you can just take a kneaded eraser and go back and kind of lift the lines. Especially if you're working in watercolor, I definitely recommend doing this. Even if it just helps you not feel so confined to the initial sketch, it's good to just go back and lighten these lines. My next sketch I'm gonna do with a micron pen, and that is primarily just so you can see what I'm doing, but I think you should probably use a graphite pencil. That way you can erase, you can change things, and also if you're working with something like watercolor, you can lift up like I'm doing now once you have your initial sketch more laid out. So again, I'm using a pen just so that you can see what I'm doing, but I want to draw this cow in 4 different styles so that you can kind of see the decision making an artist goes through when applying a certain style or developing their style to really any motif. And so this first cow I want to do in a little bit more of a realistic style in terms of the drawing. So I'm not going to deviate too much from this initial sketch. I might change the head a little bit. So yeah, the positioning that you decide to do can be changed. It's definitely not set in stone. And because I'm coming back with gouache, I can kind of cover these lines, but again, if you're using something like watercolor, or even if you just want to do this initial portion with, you know, something like pencil or pen and ink, that's totally fine too. So I like to sketch very loosely so that I can make changes as I'm drawing. So you don't want to draw with a thick, hard line when you are getting your initial drawing or sketch down. So from the reference photo, I'm just referencing that very first image on the top left. And the style I want to do, the drawing style is a little bit more realistic, but I want to get really loose with my brush strokes when I'm painting. And so this is a little bit more of, you know, what we might consider a fine art look. It's a little more impressionistic, and it lends itself to the medium of something like oil paint or acrylic paint. And so if that's kind of the direction you're seeking, we'll come back to this cow in just a minute. I just want to first get out the drawings so that we can approach these motifs in a way that we can see, like, just from the very drawing style and how we're choosing to render, we are going to get some different looks. Actually, let me get the spots on his. Okay, I'm just going to do this so I know this is more brown. And it doesn't have to be exact. If you want to do more black cow spots on a realistic cow, you can change things however you want, because this is your art, it's your sketchbook, and again, this is kind of the place for you to experiment and play. So you don't have to do the exact same thing I'm doing. So because you are taking this workshop to try to find your art style, I'm gonna assume that a lot of you are wanting something maybe a little bit more stylized than sort of this realistic rendering of this cow. This might be where you're headed, and you might want to, you know, find your style more in your brushwork or your color or the way you're applying light and shadow. You know, we'll get into this as a style as well, but I think that from the scale of realism to totally non-representational abstract, I think most of us are going to be somewhere in the middle. So let's draw these other three cows in a way that is a bit more quote-unquote stylized. It's a little bit more illustration-y, and we'll go from something that's kind of a little bit more stylized to something that's a lot more kind of abstract in terms of shape. So this next cow, so I have my basic map of where the initial sketch was. And so I kind of know where the back is, where the legs are, and this and that. But let's say here is my chance to play, and I want to make the legs really short, and I want to make the body really boxy and kind of tall. I'm gonna kind of take out these curves of the hips and just kind of maybe come even boxier like this, and kind of have my initial box shape. And then let's say maybe it would be fun to make the head smaller. So you can play with proportions here. This is not supposed to be a realistic rendering. So we have the map of the head here. I can kind of see how it's supposed to be, but I am going to make this head smaller. You could do giant ears if you wanted to. You know, these are all decisions that we're making. So I'm gonna make a place for the nose and the eyes. So this doesn't have to be that great right now, but this is another way to do a cow. So from there, I'm just gonna do the legs kind of skinny and short. Short compared to the big rectangular shape. So shape is definitely something you want to pay attention to when you are developing an art style. I am just going to look at some of the black cows in the upper right-hand side and kind of see how the spots are. And I'm going to do some spots, still kind of doing some quote-unquote realistic spots in terms of the drawing style. And then, you know, you could even add an udder if you wanted to. Let's do that. Why not? And then let's say we want to do the tail really short too. Echo those legs being short. Okay, so you can see how different these two cows are already. Okay, so next I'm gonna take this kind of similar idea, and maybe it's kind of similar to this stylistically, but I might do the body a little bit less dramatic. Let's see, I wanna get this chest still in here and kind of get the angle of this leg. Okay, so we're still doing it kind of boxy, but it's not such a perfect rectangle. Okay, so instead of doing so sketchy, I'm making a little bit more definitive decisions with my line work here. And of course you can do looser sketching first before you kind of decide where you want those lines. And again, it'll be easier with graphite pencil because you can erase or make very light marks and then go back and make darker marks. But instead of doing just straight on legs, I'm doing them a little bit more like this. So you can already see how different that makes these two cows look. Let's say I don't want to do the head quite so tiny in terms of proportion. Like you can tell here, I'm definitely playing with the proportions a lot more. And this one, I'm going to make the proportions like a little more true. I'm just trying to get that shape in of the initial sketch. And then for this one, I'm going to make the eyes closed. Let's make the tail go up higher and kind of curve down. Here we go. So you can see like in this more realistic one, it just kind of comes straight out. In this, we're getting a little bit more playful with our curve. And of course this, we did a really short proportion. So from there, I'm going to play a little bit more with my dots. So I kind of did these, here, let me fill this in so I know that these are going to be my dots. So for this, I think I want to play with the contrast of doing a little bit more realistic style illustration, even though it's not quite this realistic, but I'm going to simplify the dots on the back. So that's like another just decision that we're making and make them kind of more abstract, organic shapes. And I think I'm just gonna do those three. So that's a very different approach from here to here to here. And then for my last cow, I'm gonna try to get a little bit more cartoony. I'm gonna try to get a little bit more abstract. Again, kind of going back to this shape. It's like, what can I do? Maybe I wanna make the head really large this time. So I'm going to think about the shape of the head. The top of the head's gonna be much bigger. And then the shape kind of comes down like this. And maybe I make the ears really small and give this one a bigger nose. And for the body, let's see what we can do in terms of shape. So kind of the more abstract you want to get with these motifs, the more you're focusing on shapes. And so I think I can simplify these dots even more, but let's come back to that. Maybe I want really skinny long legs this time. For the tail, maybe I do something totally different and just have it come straight out. Maybe for eyes, I just do circles. I could even add eyebrows. If I wanted to do some kind of udder, I could make it more boxy, like that. And I could even make spots on the back way more simplified. Like maybe I do kind of the opposite angle and fill in this whole thing. So in terms of drawing style, you can see how different we can get with each motif. Now let's start painting. So when you're working on your art style, I do recommend working in a limited color palette. I like using a ceramic or porcelain palette like this because it only allows me to have 6 colors plus white, and I'm using sort of this indigo color mixed with black as my black, but it's not a true black, which I find just more interesting, especially with this palette. So I have my jar of water and a few round brushes. I think the size is 8, 5, and 3/0, a really tiny one, and then a flat brush at a size 6. So I don't even know where I got these brushes. It's just, they all kind of accumulate. But because this one we did is so simple, I want to start out with doing this guy. I'm gonna spray some water in my palette with this little spray bottle. And if you are using regular gouache, I do recommend dropping in some 1 or 2 drops of your vegetable glycerin into the paint to prevent it from cracking and crumbling and getting kind of nasty. And that way you can keep a dry palette. It's been a game changer for me. Okay, so I'm going to try to do different colors in each square, and then that way you can kind of see how your colors can coordinate together as you're doing different motifs. Of course, these are different drawing styles, so that's going to make them less cohesive, but even with the different drawing style, I kind of want to show you how color can tie everything together. So I'm going to fill in the background first with my sort of purpley color because I want the body of the cow to stay white. Okay, while this paint dries as the ground, I'm gonna move on to a different ground, and because I want this one to be a little bit more realistic, I think I'm gonna stick with my gold color. Okay, so from there I'm gonna do a pink background. Okay, so assuming these 4 motifs were in the same drawing style, we would want to echo our colors around the composition, either in one design or in a collection. So if these were different artworks, we'd want to have some of the same colors repeating in different artworks so that they would go together. Of course, these are in different drawing styles, but I think you'll get the idea of the color. So for example, with this being the pink that's in the background, I'm gonna use the same pink in different other places. So I will use the pink in this cow's nose and in the udder. Okay, and then we can place the pink in different areas, but I'm gonna come back to that. When it comes to developing your style, sometimes you want to put unexpected color in different places. So for example, because this background is pink, I don't want to have a pink udder on top of a pink background. So I am going to make the udder yellow. Because I'm making the udder yellow, I'm also going to make the nose yellow and this little part of the tail. And while we're at it, why not make this cow's feet yellow? If it's looking like it's not contrasting enough from the background, it's okay, we can come back with a different color. So that might be the case there. Okay, so I'm liking the purpley blue color in the background here, so I'm gonna use that actually for this cow's spots. Okay, I'm liking the way that's looking, so I'm gonna come back and make the hooves the same purple. Because I don't necessarily want these black lines, I'm just coming in and kind of making lines in the purple color that I want to cover up. So if you have pencil lines, I'm assuming you've already erased those, unless you're keeping that in your design as a stylistic choice. Okay, I'm gonna come to my darkest color and start filling in this cow a little bit more. This is my indigo color mixed with black. So for this cow, I am going for a more realistic style, which is kind of why I left it as is a bit, because I'm gonna go mix a few more colors and try to get it a little bit more realistic, but you can see how all of these colors relate to each other and connect the different designs, even though the drawing style is quite different. So far we've covered color and the shape of the cow. And so this one's very geometric. This one is kind of distorted in terms of proportions, smaller head, larger body. And then this one is a little bit more realistic in terms of proportion, but definitely stylized. And we did some mark making on the head, which we'll come back to a little bit more. So let me focus on this cow now, and I'm gonna use my red color and mix some of the yellow into it to get that brown shade. So initially I'm just gonna put down a wash. We're still gonna be able to see all of my pin marks. So I mean, and that's another stylistic choice you could make, is have an under layer of pen or pencil and do such a thin wash that you choose to keep those lines. Okay, so that gives me a good kind of base layer, so I kind of see where colors are going. I'm just gonna add some pink on the nose. So I could leave my cow like this and that would be a cool style, you know, but I am gonna push this a little bit further and try to get a looser painting style and a thicker painting style. So I'm gonna need to mix up some more paint. Okay, so I am actually taking my palette knife and I'm gonna try to apply some of this paint like that. Using a palette knife can really help you get loose marks. It's kind of turning into this like corally color. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more of an oil painted look. From there, I'm gonna take the square brush and kind of just try to hold it back and do a similar thing. So I'm not being real tight. I wanna loosen up my strokes and my style a bit more. So you wanna get a lot of like thick gouache on your brush and then make some strokes. So right now I'm just trying to kind of target some of these highlight areas and get a variety of color, whether it's like the red, the pink, or the gold. Okay, so then this ear is looking a bit darker, so I'm just gonna wipe my brush off on my cloth and grab some of the solid red and just plop that on the ear, and we can see if it's contrasting enough. I don't think that's really contrasting enough, so what we can do is grab some of our blue or purple and mix that in with the red. So it's giving us a little bit of a darker brown there. I'm going to try to fill in some of these areas of white. Of course, the cow is not going to be a perfect white, so I'm actually going to mix the white and try to get more of a gray. So then I can kind of look at my white areas and fill those in. And I can always come back with brighter white highlights. But I'm trying to kind of paint loose, so I don't even necessarily want to fill in the lines that I've created. Because I don't have a lot of water on my brush, I'm getting this dry brush effect, which is one way to add texture. So if you're not liking all that color, this is like one way to do it, and we could finish filling in, but we could also pull back and make this a little bit more of a natural brown. Okay, so here I'm choosing to add this shadow, but of course I'm using this same purple color so you can see how the color is relating to each other. However, this cow still has a much more realistic style, even though the brushwork is very loose and the color is still quite playful compared to a photograph or photorealism. But we are kind of rendering realistic proportions and shape and perspective here, unlike where we see the cow really deviate from that in these other three options. So now let's talk about adding some different texture and just some different ways to push the style. So let's say I want to play with more texture here. I can add a totally different medium, and I'm gonna play with some colored pencils that I have. Yeah, this is a good one. So we can kind of see how we could go about adding some different texture to the cow, and we don't even have to stay within the lines. We can deviate from that a bit and just have fun with it. We just want to be consistent if we are doing this mark making process throughout the design. And if we wanted to add the udder in, we could do that with colored pencil. And it just gives a totally different feel to the rest of the cow. Another option to think about is adding different types of texture. So we added some texture with the colored pencil, but we can also add a lot of different mark making or texture or pattern within the design. So I'm just gonna take a graphite pencil and start adding elements there as well. So I'm just gonna add some patterns. And then everything I do like this, whether it's adding texture, adding patterns, is a stylistic decision. So another thing we could do is make these little patterns kind of come outside of the shape. So you don't have to stay within the bounds of the shape. I'm doing that with the tail here, kind of having the hair come out a bit. So line is another big stylistic element you want to think about. You can, not have line, or you can have line in your art style. So thinking about how you use line, whether it's really tight, kind of like the initial line that we have on this tail, or whether it's really loose and organic, these are all decisions. And you can just play. Part of finding your art style, and especially working in a sketchbook, is the permission to play. So we can choose to be loose, like either with our brush strokes and painting, or with our line work. So our initial painting of this was actually a little bit more tight, but coming back in with the layer of graphite pencil on top helped loosen us up quite a bit. So as a recap for this workshop, we went over what kind of subject matter to create in your sketchbooks. So before you sit down and open your sketchbook to fill it up and create your style, you have to have some kind of subject matter to draw. Today we did cows just as a simple motif, but really think about your subject matter, whether that is landscapes or cityscapes, abstract art, figure drawing, portraits, or some kind of still life. Your color palette is another topic that we covered, so I always recommend having a limited color palette. Even though we have different drawing styles among these cows, I hope that you can see how having a limited color palette really brings all of the artworks together by repeating certain colors over and over again. Medium is another one that we discussed. So of course you can experiment with different art supplies and different materials while filling up your sketchbook, but I do recommend trying to narrow down to one or two mediums that you primarily work in, because this will help give your art style a particular look. And then we talked about the drawing style throughout the exercise while drawing and painting these 4 cows. So we first talked about proportion, and every single element in your drawing style is going to be some kind of a decision that you have to make as the artist to inform your style. And so proportion is one. Are you going to have some kind of realistic proportions, or do you want to play with proportions? And you can really see that on the 2 cows on the left have more realistic proportions, while the 2 cows on the right, we really played with proportions of the head, the tail, the body, etc. Shape is another thing that we covered. So again, the 2 cows on the left have a little bit more of a realistic shape. Of course, the Top left cow is going to be the most realistic. Even though we did really loose brushwork, the shape and proportion is the most realistic, while the other cows deviate from that a lot. And we can really see in the bottom right cow how much we played with shape. Line is another artistic element that we discussed, and we came back and brought more line into the bottom left cow when we brought the graphite pencil out and kind of just retraced our steps with this really loose organic line work. So of course you can use line however you want. It can be thick or thin, it could be dotted, it could have a charcoal line, it could be graphite like I used here, it could be anything. But line is something that, again, you have to decide as the artist if you want line to be used in your work, and if so, how. Texture is another thing that we discussed, and so we played a lot with having a lot of really loose brushworks and just adding kind of that dry brush texture into the top left cow. And we also added texture and pattern into the bottom left cow, and the right two cows have a little bit of a smoother texture. Because I'm using gouache as a medium, overall these are going to have a pretty matte, flat texture in general. So the medium, again, is important because there are limitations and characteristics of the medium that you use that are going to contribute to things like texture. Another thing we covered are brush strokes and mark making. So again, we played with this a lot with the two cows on the left, the top and bottom. We used a more painterly style that is more conducive to maybe oil painting or acrylics. Of course, you can also use it in gouache, especially if you're working in a sketchbook. But if you are looking to develop a style where you're going to be more of an oil painter or something a little more fine art, then, this is a good option for that. Of course, that's just one way to do things. The sky is really the limit, but just to show you the different options and the possibilities we wanted to play with, being loose or being tight, and placing different marks and line work and texture and all the things. And these are just a few of the artistic elements that you can play with when you are filling up your sketchbook and developing your own art style. So I definitely encourage you to fill up your entire sketchbook with this kind of intention. Remember to work with one good sketchbook and one bad sketchbook so that you're not doing anything too random and you are really staying focused on your goals and making those decisions of all the artistic elements we just discussed. Thank you so much for watching the workshop, guys. If you are interested in learning more about how to develop your art style, I highly recommend you check out my paid program, Art Style Academy, and check out details below for that if you are interested. I hope to see you in Art Style Academy and over on my YouTube channel for more free content. Love you guys so much and see you around. Bye, guys.